Hello, thank you for listening to 3 Legacies Recovery Recordings. If you enjoy our program, please be sure to like and subscribe to the channel, and don't forget to share with a friend. We're also self-supporting, so feel free to contribute to the channel through Venmo at Recovery Recordings 615. Please note that the views expressed on this podcast are solely our individual views and do not represent any official stance of any 12-step program. We are not affiliated with any specific recovery organization, and this content should not be considered as professional advice for alcoholism or addiction.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to 3 Legacies Recovery Recording Podcast. I'm your host, Paul, and today's date is Wednesday, May 21st, 2025. This is episode 33, and I want to thank everyone that's been sending in the emails and stuff. Our email address is recoveryrecordings615@yahoo.com. And then we're continuing with one of our series we've been doing with Judy L from Westminster, Colorado. How you doing, Judy?
I'm good. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much. For all the listeners, me and Judy have been doing a podcast series on traditions in all our affairs. And this is our third episode of this particular series. We're doing traditions 4 and 5 tonight. How you been, Judy?
I've been great. Thank you very much. It's spring and I'm feeling wonderful about the warmer days. Aren't we lucky?
Hey, man. Yeah,
Such good weather.
I was just talking about that yesterday. Yeah. How was your Mother's Day? You have a good Mother's Day?
I did. Traditionally, I went with my daughter to see a movie. I only have one daughter, but a daughter and a stepdaughter, and we've always gone to a movie or some fun thing on Mother's Day and then maybe catch dinner with all the boys.
Nice.
And so it's always been something we've done. And it's today, what's most important is the company of the people I love. It's that simple. Getting calls from folks and spending time with people. What a delicious thing we get to do.
Yeah. Amen. Yeah.
How about yourself? I'm sure you took your wife and went out. And do you have children?
Yeah. I got 2 stepkids. My stepson lives with us. He's 21, and my stepdaughter lives on the other side of Tennessee, and she's 14. Yeah. And on Mother's Day, the day before Mother's Day, we went down to Chattanooga, where my family lives. It's a couple hours from here. And visited with my mom and my sister and my grandparents, and we all went out to eat. And then,
nice.
Yeah, and then on Mother's Day, we drove over to we met my stepdaughter halfway across the state. Yeah, and we do that a lot though. We meet halfway. We go have lunch or dinner or whatever. Yeah, we had a blast though. Good time. And then also, we had talked earlier about me and my wife went to Panama City over this past weekend, and it was great. We had a wonderful time. Yeah, it was cool.
Isn't that a wonderful thing?
Yeah.
Isn't it? Excuse my coughing. I've got a little spring allergy thing going on, I think.
Yeah.
Everything's blooming.
Yeah. Yeah. That's the one side of it, even though I get excited about spring as well at the same time. Allergies can kill me.
Well, you realize I'm in Colorado, which means we have winter.
Yeah. Yeah.
We have a real winter.
Yeah.
So it's very nice to be able to,
nice.
Spring is real. The truth is I've got twice the wardrobe for summer, and it only lasts for like 3 months max.
Wow.
The other 9 months of the year, it's just sweaters and, stay warm.
Yeah.
Because you just never know.
Yeah.
You just never know. So, yeah.
Yeah.
It's, I'm excited that we're able to do traditions, and I'm excited that we can think about them in terms of, how is it that we practice these principles in all our affairs? What does it mean?
Good question.
I mean, we use so many words, Paul, that they lose their meaning. And what has meaning is our experience and sometimes the description of the intention behind stuff rather than the rules behind stuff. Right? The traditions were written for the group. And it, as you know, in our book, it says that, we practice these principles in all our affairs. So here's 12 principles that I need to practice in all my affairs. And if I think that these traditions might bring harmony and unity to the groups I'm in, they offer me an opportunity to handle or to at least to address the area of my life that all of us seem to have the same problems in relationships.
So true.
Yeah. I mean, who gets here with all their relationships intact? Who hasn't had all kinds of problems here and there, right?
Yeah.
And continuing after we get sober frequently. So sometimes we put down a drink, and that's what we are. 20 years later, we're just somebody that doesn't drink. So if I'm going to bring maturity and harmony to the groups I'm in, and there's lots of groups in life. There's community and church and special interest group. It doesn't seem to matter whether it's a nudist club or a farmers co-op or a quilting group, or they're all going to benefit from these principles that we've been so fortunate as to have. So the group's well-being comes certainly first. We talked about that.
Yeah.
And most of us don't come equipped with the virtue of putting something before self-interest.
That's an understatement, right?
Yeah. So, there's this funny statement I not fought, but didn't really quite accept or understand. Somewhere, I forget where, Bill says, we never thought to strive for humility, to deliberately try to develop it. And I thought, oh, who wants to do that?
Yeah.
Who wants to deliberately have enough humility to put myself second?
Yeah.
And yet, if the ideals of my life are changed because of my fellowship in Alcoholics Anonymous, then I begin to recognize my selfish and self-centered aspects of my nature. So we did unity, and then we talked about a group's conscience, and we talked about all alcoholics are welcomed in the third tradition, and who wants to play God with somebody else's life. And tonight we're even going to talk about the other expansion of that, which is the fifth tradition. So, do you want to read the long or short form of tradition 4?
I would love to. I just don't have it. Do you have it in front of you right now? I don't.
Oh, yeah, I do.
Okay.
I do. The long form, I usually like the long forms because they're clearer. The short form, like they sacrifice something to fit it onto those window shades. So the long form says, with respect to its own affairs, comma. So we can talk about that. Each AA group should be responsible to no other authority than its own conscience. But when its plans concern the welfare of neighboring groups, also those groups ought to be consulted. So what's autonomy? It's kind of a big word.
Oh.
The dictionary talks about it as, something about the right to be self-governing. And probably if you looked at philosophy or psychology, you find it a little slightly different answer there too. But autonomy really means that you get to make a decision on your own behalf, right?
Mm.
It's not like alcoholics haven't been doing that forever.
Yeah.
I make a decision based on my own behalf as I saw it.
Mm.
And then we get to AA. And so we learn there's some moral independence, like the capacity to self-govern,
Mm.
the ability to be responsible, the ability to say something and mean it and actually do it.
Yeah.
So, I think this is such a big deal, and I'll tell you why. I don't know if this is probably more than you wanted to have on your radio show, but my husband and I had a really difficult period of time when we were married, about 15 years. We're both members. We're both in AA. We're both good members of AA, home group, doing all the stuff, got sponsors, the whole thing. But the marriage had become, I don't want to call it a nightmare, but let's just say it was very difficult. And it got increasingly difficult over a period of time. And I was finding myself looking at his face in the morning to decide how I felt.
Mm.
And I was single for over 10 years, maybe even closer to 15. And I know how to be independent. I've never known very well how to be dependent.
Mm-hmm.
And so it was a brand new thing for me to look at somebody else and then be in reaction mode all the time, right?
Mm. Wow.
So it took us a long time. It's a longer story. It took us a long time to work our way out of this bad patch. And lots of people have had a bad patch in a relationship. But we got married in front of AA, and nobody's going to help us get divorced. We made our commitments in front of you all, in front of our kids, all six of them, in front of the grandparents. And, we just did everything. We did everything that we could to do this thing above board, but it still was going down the tubes. And yeah, there's probably reasons that we can work at, but sometimes I think it's just age. Age in a relationship, getting bored and maybe getting less honest and not having something anyway. Whatever it was, is not the issue here. What happened was that I began to work on traditions and found that, if we're going to have a working relationship, what's the kind of qualities that people have in a working relationship? And one of those is autonomy. And how do you have autonomy? It means just like they said with the tradition that we are an autonomous group. The two of us were a group, and individually we have to be responsible to those things that concern both of us, but that I have a private life and a sponsor and sponsees, and that's part of my autonomy that I don't share with him. We had different kids. We had different ways to handle money. We have different kids. We have different ways that we raise their children, different styles of gift giving or confidence sharing, that kind of thing. But autonomy means that he gets to do the relationships with his people as he sees fit. And I get to do my relationships with my people as I see fit, except when those plans concern us. Then we have to talk about it. I've got a funny story I'll share with you later, but I hope that makes sense.
Yeah. Feel free to share the
So,
stories too. I love this.
the ability to act independently from each other began to develop after we were in such a negative, bad place. We'd gotten unhealthily wrapped around the axle with each other. We're looking at somebody's face, deciding, "Oh, I hate him this morning,"
Yeah.
And he hadn't probably even gotten out of bed yet, and a lot of that kind of thing. So,
Yeah.
so we had to work on the very things that AA, I think, brings to the group, that I can bring to work, that I can bring to my marriage. And that's a mutual respect for somebody else's autonomy and respect for my own. I can encourage a little risk taking and accept the responsibility that comes with that. Because I make mistakes. I've learned that.
Amen.
I'm not a mistake, but I'm a person who makes mistakes. There's a big difference in those two things.
Oh.
So Lou and I are very different kinds of people. He's kind of a perfectionist, and I'm kind of a goof. And I have a lot of leeway about myself in making most mistakes because I was raised in a family that tolerated me making mistakes. They did. And he was not. We have very different messages around who screwing up. And I didn't realize that. I didn't respect the difference that one can make when we were together at a year. So we hadn't gotten to the depth of 6 and 7, frankly. And because we were head over heels in love, we were not really looking to work the deepest program. We were just still busy floating on the surface of romance for a long time. So, so I've got to learn to tolerate my mistakes and to tolerate his, and accept that we see those differently. But how do we act independently? So, I've had marriages throughout I've had 2 marriages. I've had problems in both. And finally, I gathered all the sponsor wisdom I could find to work on some of the traditions. And I don't know that I'm any easier to live with, but we were married after 35 years, which is something.
Yeah.
And I still like him, and he still likes me.
That's awesome.
Not bad.
Yeah. It makes me think of me and my wife so much. Same thing, like over the last couple of years, we've really, her relationship with I don't remember the words you use, but screwing up for that is completely different than mine. I'm more like your husband, probably, right? And
Probably.
I'm more kind of militant, But over the last couple of years, it's been one of those situations where we've kind of had to, see that we're not the same people, and that's okay. We've had different upbringings, right. We have different, And it's funny, right. Though, I never even would have considered until I started getting into a lot of this stuff. And it's sad. It's really sad. It sounds so horrible to say this, but it's just my truth. But like, I was in the same boat. I never even would have considered like some of this stuff was making, maybe some of the choices I make are not, creating some unity in our relationship. Right.
Right.
It's crazy.
So, if you don't have independence, if you don't have independence, you create all kinds of negative stuff. There's negative splashback, if you will. Maybe we get jealous, or maybe we look for other people's approval and then go crazy when we don't get it. Or I get angry when other people don't know when I need privacy. Or I overwork or expect others to do that too, and become a victim pretty easily. Maybe I judge family members when they are doing their own thing and they're not doing what I think I'd like them to be doing. I don't consider others' opinions. These are the negatives of not giving somebody else autonomy. I don't consider others' opinions or wants when they're making their decisions, and then when I'm making mine, and it makes me want to micromanage what other people do. And then they resent me. And then I'm shocked. And then I'm a victim, right? So maybe I can feel dissatisfied in my romantic relationships because I'm still needing approval from others in order to act like a grown-up. And a grown-up is entitled to autonomy. Even kids will want autonomy. And when they're kids, you're going to balance that autonomy with danger and safety issues. But when are they supposed to practice it, if not now? So I expect others, when I don't respect autonomy, I expect others to fulfill my needs, my emotional needs. Like I can't deal with my husband's inner fears. He can't deal with mine. And then what happens is we're inclined to be dishonest about emotions and information and be afraid of ridicule and not being admired, that kind of thing. It's really a negative thing when we don't have enough respect to, and it happens at the group, and it happens at work, and it happens at the district, because what it means to the group is that the group can decide on issues that affect the group as a whole. You can decide you want to hire a Muslim preacher for your Christian group. You can. It may not be what we do in AA, but the point is you have the right in AA to make mistakes and to be wrong. And we have to let other people have the same right, not just us. That's the hard part. Oh, I want it for me, but not for you. So we can offer positions to people in the group. We can decide whether we want to offer coffee or service, or how we want to pray, or where we want to meet. Do we want to have a greeter? All of what kind of prayers do we want to close or open with? What do we want to be conservative? Do we want to be radical? Do we want to be rigid? You can do any of it. It's this whole idea is about having the basic willingness to let a group make their own mistake. Mistakes as in plural. And the same with people. And maybe the same with work in most cases. If you're a boss, you let somebody have the job you've given them to do, see if they have what they need to do that job, and then let them be an adult. Otherwise, you got the wrong employee. So if we're trying to make it open for people to make mistakes, you know as well as I do, the only way you can stay married or hold a group together is if you trust that there's a God there. If I think I'm God, I'm going to ruin this thing just like I ruined every other relationship before I got here.
Amen.
Because I'm always trying to get mine now. Get what I need now. We were talking about the doctor's opinion where it says that the newcomer must have his ideals must be grounded.
Yeah.
We were talking about it. We don't even know what the ideals are.
I've said that so many times.
Yeah. We don't tell them what the ideals are, but we're trying to find some way to let our ideals be grounded in something that has depth and weight. And but when I got here, the only ideals I saw were the ones that you guys demonstrated. And if you don't demonstrate them, it's a pretty poor group, because you're going to create members of Alcoholics Anonymous who don't understand what the ideals are that they're trying to aim for, the this stuff in later steps, that it's really a sponsor's perhaps an obligation to help somebody find that. And even with service positions, a central office, an intergroup. We have a couple of intergroups in Colorado, maybe 5, maybe 6, depends on the month. There, intergroup or central office is not a group, but they are responsible back. So they're not autonomous, but they are responsible back to the groups they serve. My district is accountable back to the various groups that support them. And that's accountability. But it's what we allow them to do. And then when they report back, which is our basic, that's how we do things, right?
Yeah.
The servant reports back. And when we do that, we get to have that precious, also precious element of trust.
I love that. Yeah. So true. Thank goodness.
You can't work with a newcomer unless they have trust.
Yeah.
You can't work with your own sponsor unless you trust each other. You can't tell the truth to your group unless you trust it. They can't give you a position unless they trust you to carry it out. So again, it's every member is autonomous except in matters affecting the other person or the group or the couple or the work group as a whole, right?
Yeah.
Should be autonomous except when others are involved. So we kind of sacrifice people pleasing and being a dictator and allow ourselves to grow up a little emotionally on our own dime.
Shows how important context is, and like conversations like this, and like studying the history and studying just the experiences that they've had that they were, we're blessed enough to have available to us in all this literature. Because with our best intentions, and for me anyways, it just, this stuff did not show up naturally. I mean, it kind of, other than issues, I had to have a lot of issues, and I had people that had been further down the path start sharing this stuff with me, right?
Right. Well, think about it. Nothing works out well unless we consider the other people.
Yeah.
Because if I don't, then I become God in my own life again. So let me tell you a story. Again, it's a marriage story. I've learned a lot of lessons in marriage and in parenthood and in sponsorship, but these are from marriage. So I won't tell you about the first marriage. That's a whole different ball of wax. But in this one, when we got together, we made a decision that if we were going to decorate the house, we each had opinions. Lou and I have very different opinions on almost everything. He would like all walls to be white. I would like every wall to be a different color. Yeah, we're very, very different. So we made an agreement that if either of us bought anything like art, pictures, whatever, that we would not buy it until we had both agreed that we both wanted it. Okay? So one day I'm in Boulder and it's the artist workshop day when you can go around all the artists in their workshops and kind of talk to them and meet them and see what they do. I love that stuff. So I was wandering around. And I saw this picture. I don't know why I liked it. It's not even anything I would normally like. But I saw this picture and I said, I have to have that. She said, oh, that's wonderful. And I said, with the frame, because the frame is perfect. Oh, yeah, that'll be great. I'll frame it for you. Okay. So, well, I can't afford it yet. So let me pay for it half, and then I'll pay for the other half, in a month. I'll come pick it up. Okay, that'd be fine. I'll have it framed by then. It was just, I think it was a picture of a horse or something. I don't normally do that, but I liked this one. And it was not a big deal. I mean, this is not like, great art. I'm talking about local artists that I like to support, and occasionally I've bought a few things. And so I went to pick it up, paid her my money, looked great. She had it all wrapped up then. And I have it in the back of my car, headed home, and it occurred to me, I'm not supposed to buy anything. That's art. It never occurred to me. I broke the rule. So being a good alcoholic, I said, well, I can't bring it home. I know what I'll do. I'll give it to him for his birthday. Right?
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Somewhere in there, I managed to reconnect as a spiritual person. And I said, oh, I can't do that either. Because, So I had it hidden in the garage. He didn't find it. But one day, about 6 months later, I said, I got to tell you something. I bought this picture. I was going to give it to you for a birthday present because I forgot to ask you if you liked it. And I told him the whole story of making it pretend and setting up this. I had it all handled. I was,
Yeah.
And we both had a laugh. And his picture hangs in his office.
Yeah, that's funny.
Isn't that funny?
That's awesome. I love how you said somewhere in there I reconnected as a spiritual person or whatever. That's so funny.
Yeah, right.
And so I
Right.
get that. Yeah. Oh man, I get that.
Oh man, I don't always get it right off the bat.
Yeah.
I had some Japanese in-laws when I was, maybe 7 years sober. One of my kids married a girl whose family was from Japan, and they were coming out to visit. And we had a nice visit, and then I was going to send them because they do gifts like crazy. They do lots of gifts. They take gifts to their dentist. They take gifts to their grocers. They just wrap up things and take gifts.
Wow.
They aren't big gifts, but they're gifts. And, we don't really have they would send me things like Japanese note paper and stuff. And they're like, we don't have a thing that's American that I can think of. So what am I going to send them? And then I remembered that the father of the family loves scotch. So after I spent about 3 hours picking out a bottle of scotch at the local liquor store, sitting on the floor, looking at all the labels, looking at all the bottles, realizing I have no idea which one of them is the right one because I no longer drink. I snagged a couple of salesmen to give me a lesson in the latest scotch, sensibilities. Took my bottle home. I was very proud of my bottle. And then I found out that you can't ship a bottle overseas. It's not allowed. And one more time, the alcoholic in me is still in there. One of my kids, the sober kid, I have a sober kid, was living with us at the time. And they watched me while I carved away a cardboard box and created a cradle. And I put all the gifts around it so that it shouldn't break. And they would never know that it was in there. And I had this all arranged. It took me 2 weeks to perfect my technique. But this man was going to get a bottle of scotch. Because what did I want? Prestige and nobody telling me what to do.
I get it.
Yeah, all the wrong motivation for anything. Especially after I already spent 3 hours choosing it. It was like I wanted to cradle it in my arms.
Yeah.
Should have noticed something was a little off, but I didn't. And so finally I had it all ready and I put it in the closet. And again, somewhere along the line, I had a moment. And I said, I heard myself saying, Judy, that's a really alcoholic way to deal with this. You're an alcoholic. What are you doing? I said to me. Meanwhile, Lou didn't say anything. Tim didn't say anything. And I finally told him when everybody was home that night, I said, it just occurred to me that I'm an alcoholic. Found somebody to give the bottle of scotch to.
Man, I get it.
And sent off the rest of my gifts. But all that time, it was like the fact that I'm an alcoholic was always there, but it was dim in some place in the back of my head.
Yeah.
And I was making all the wrong decisions for all the wrong reasons. I'm sober. I don't think about drinking it, but I'm acting like an alcoholic. Does that make sense?
Absolutely. Yeah.
So, yeah. So these things, so then I had to tell that story, for the next month to everybody that would listen. Guess what? I'm still an alcoholic. And, I'm really grateful that those things have happened a lot of times. Because, my first mistake was I wasn't consulting with anyone when I make a decision that might affect others. How would it be to be arrested for smuggling a bottle of scotch to Japan?
Yeah.
Really, Judy? So, yeah, it would have affected the people around me. I could have invited others into the decision. They let me spin. But it says if it's going to affect other people, maybe when I don't want to do it, I've again become God in my own life. Which is what shows up on my inventory every single time. My 7th step, my conduct. Oh, the steps are there to help me restore my relationship with God. And then the traditions show me how to get along with God and others, So
I love that.
I think the 4th tradition kind of works on this business of not doing things for others just for approval and prestige, but to actually invite other people into a decision that might affect them.
And I hate doing
There's some
that.
things that have to be done alone with God, like writing inventory. That's an autonomous function. Every group has autonomy. So it brings responsibility to own my defects, not affect other groups or other families or other, work groups or extended families, How I act could greatly affect another person's willingness to come to AA.
Amen.
So it's pretty easy to affect others with my actions. So what about my group? Can we take actions that harms AA? You bet.
Yeah.
Somebody just told me about somebody in their town who was promoting a sober living house's fundraiser. And he said he didn't believe in anonymity. So he was telling his story to the newspaper and soliciting money at the same time. Now, how does a newcomer deal with that? There's no dues or fees for AA membership, but here's the fee for coming in. So the newspapers didn't know, but we're supposed to know these things. So I mentioned nudists before. So how about the newspaper article, which I have seen. Somebody in town had it. It was, he was out doing a talk somewhere. He was a past trustee. And the newspaper had about 8 people holding up a sign that read AA nudists.
What the heck?
No, it might have attracted some and repelled others, but we don't want to claim that for my group's reputation.
Yeah.
Somehow, don't you think? We always think that this time it's different for me. So I can do what I want. Bill believed pretty completely that we're allowed to make our own mistakes. And we not only are allowed to make mistakes, it was encouraged. Because he felt like there's only 2 teachers. You know? It's only 2 teachers. And that's kind of the problem with me is that what if you go out and drink? That's one teacher. You know, oh, whoops, I guess I don't want to do that again. And the other is that we have some kind of spiritual connection to God. So.
Interesting. I'll tell you,
does that make sense?
Makes all the sense, yeah. And it also makes me, I get convicted because I can't tell you how often, and again, it's something I just discovered over the last couple of years, but how often, I don't confide in my wife and decisions, right? It's funny because there's even like a childish, I guess I'm calling it childish element in me that would rather just not go do it than have to ask.
Yeah.
You get what I mean?
I mean, I really understand that.
Yeah.
It takes some humility, and maybe the childish part of me is always the one that doesn't want to be told no.
Absolutely. Yeah.
I just don't want to be told no. So as a little kid, I was just a sneak.
Yeah.
Why was I a sneak? Because if I asked and they told me no, I couldn't have it. But if I snuck and took it, they couldn't stop me.
Yeah.
So I was a sneak and a thief early on. I'm very good at that. Not the kind that faces up to stuff I want to run and hide. All traits that really lead me back to a drink.
Yeah. So true. Yeah.
So, do you think we should talk about the 5th tradition?
Yeah.
Have we beat this one to death?
Sure. No, I love everything that's been shared. Yeah, I'm ready when you are. That's it's great context.
So the fifth tradition, long form, is, I think, beautifully said. Each Alcoholics Anonymous group ought to be a spiritual entity having but one primary purpose, that of carrying its message to the alcoholic who still suffers. So it's a little different than the 3rd tradition, right? Which talks about individual membership. The long form and the short form is pretty similar, to carry its message to the alcoholic who still suffers, one primary purpose. It's pretty almost identical. So there's not any real room there for the 2 of them carrying a different message like there is with the 3rd tradition. But if we're going to talk about how do we have principles enough to live together in AA, in my home, in work, in my community, and carry these principles into all my affairs, we can talk about what's group business and when is it not. I was starting to tell you before about central office. We have one in my town. We have a bigger one in the town of Denver. And when at one time we had a manager that nobody liked in Denver, and people would say, "What do you think?" And I'd say, "It's not my inner group. I don't have an opinion.
Mm.
So 4 helps us to understand that some things are none of my business. And I like the none of my business traditions. I think they're really helpful.
Yeah.
And it also talks about when it is my business, it's time to talk together.
Mm.
Always about communication. So you get to decide behind your own doors what you eat, what you wear, how you practice your prayer, how you practice your program. You and your wife might do them very differently. You and your wife and your group might do them differently. But that's what autonomy is about. When we need to interact with others, I have to think about the common good. Because there is a common good. I think our principles, and you're a good example of this. Principles are a matter of passion and respect and spiritual growth. So I get better as I practice. And Tradition 5 talks about that common purpose.
Mm.
Again, we're neither a dictatorship nor people-pleasing.
Mm.
Neither one of them, of those. So it's written for the sake of the individual AA groups, but it certainly, can apply to the individuals within the group as well. Alcoholics have a better shot at staying sober when they have a strong support system. It's one of the reasons why we encourage our people to start sponsoring as fast as you can get them out the door. So we work with others and we get better.
Yeah.
I think NA and Al-Anon groups as well, since those are the ones most quoted, although you could apply this to any of the others, probably Nar-Anon or Sex Addicts Anonymous or Overeaters, all, different flavors of some of our goofiness, but not the same. So we have a tendency to bleed from one of these groups into the other. And here's the problem. Each of the groups wants to identify with their own people around some common concern so they can speak the same language.
Mm-hmm.
Each of the groups asks to be allowed to practice their 12-step program with people with whom they can identify. And Al-Anon has a really strong sense of that. They ask us not to come in there and say, I'm doing Al-Anon when I, once every 6 months, have a fight with somebody and go to an Al-Anon meeting.
Mm.
If you're going to do Al-Anon, get a sponsor and work a program. But our way of life affects those beyond ourselves, right? We affect family and friendly members, family members and friends. We affect work groups who now can begin to trust the new person. Maybe. Who's grateful and trying to be a benefit, not to be, carrying around the black cloud of fear or anger, all the stuff that we get. We don't get as well as fast as I think we should sometimes. I took a really long time. I didn't change my work behavior for a very long time. So I can speak to the voice of error. Embarrassingly, it's true.
I can relate.
I
can relate to that.
Oh, I'm so embarrassed at that. You'd think I would have known better. I was so ego involved with who I am and my job and my job and my job and do they know who I am, that I could not apply my program to work for a very long time. And then by the time I realized it, there was a lot of damage done. And for some reason, it was separate. And I told myself I was being a good employee, but the fact was I was contributing to a negative atmosphere. I liked to do my job. I wanted to, I was a good employee otherwise, but I was really a destructive one too. And so I've looked at that a lot. And, AA really gained its appeal in the general public because of the number of homes that have been healed. And that's one of our most powerful examples of our success. But I don't know that it's a powerful example if I'm acting the fool all the time.
Yeah.
So, I had to, and I'm going to tell you this after the fact. A 10-step done daily would have helped me a lot. I would have, if I'd been honest enough to look at my behavior on a daily basis, I think I could have turned it around, but it didn't. So I believe I could have turned it around and been a paragon had I really worked at it, but I just did not. And I was riddled with envy and jealousy and resentment. And I created and helped to create in others a negative place. I'm embarrassed at that. I think had I practiced these fine suggestions, I think I'd have had a very different work life. I do. Now I work for myself. I'm a better employee. But so the families that have been healed are a perfectly powerful example of the success of Alcoholics Anonymous. But I think work groups would have been too, and a lot of folks have demonstrated that. I wasn't one of them, but a lot of folks have. And it's like, I can't help my own children, but you can. I can't 12-step my children, but you can. I rely on that. So we have common purpose. And that common purpose is supported by the fact that when two of us meet, there's two lives at stake, mine and yours. This is actual life and death. That's common purpose. So no matter the style or the person's personality, we still have common purpose. So, do I ask myself even, how are my actions going to affect you? How are they going to affect how you see AA? So in the home, I can live in many ways in the privacy of my home, but we've been blessed with the knowledge that, even if in the home, we have a purpose. I've been making amends to my children and my stepchildren for the past 42 years. And that means to me this. It doesn't mean I mumble a sorry, just like the book says. It means that I show up to support and to love them, the whole tribe, to keep my commitments, to invite them in with respect, not bring my problems to them, but to see them as individuals where maybe I have a part in their life and maybe I don't. That's up to them too. I usually have good intentions, even except when I don't, of course. But I usually have good intentions. I don't always act it out. So I think that in my home, we do have common purpose. It's just a different purpose than I have in my AA meeting. In my sponsorship, we have common purpose. So we can talk about this a little bit. I've sponsored people who are drug addicted and alcoholic. You probably have too.
Yeah.
As long as one of those is alcoholic, I'm okay.
Same.
But I have been relatively unsuccessful at trying on sponsorship when somebody's entering a course of treatment of one kind or another, especially with folks that are anorexic or folks that are on a lot of medications. Most medications keep me from being effective. I don't know why. I'm not effective at it. So I don't sponsor people like that. Not because of any fault of their own. They can find that, but I've been trying to be a good sponsor to people forever and to learn my lessons so that I can pay back in my life some of what I stole from other women's sense of self-esteem and security in their families. And I've worked hard at trying to show up that way, to tell you the truth. But I'm a lousy sponsor of somebody who's actually an anorexic because I have nothing there that is effective or helpful. And if you're dealing with your ACOA issues and you're on medication for your this or that, I'm usually not effective. I'm just not. So rather than try to sponsor somebody, I'll give them the name of a friend or two that actually have those kinds of things so that they can identify. Because I believe identification is critical.
Amen.
I think even NA thinks, even Al-Anon thinks identification. How do we carry a message? And that's part of that whole thing, that we're carrying a message, right?
Yeah.
Carrying, that's our purpose. Carry the message to the alcoholic who still suffers. So, I'm not doing very good since COVID of carrying the message to somebody. We tend to sit in our meeting and wait for them to come find us. Maybe I'm supposed to be carrying the message somewhere. And then I have to say, what's my group's message anyway? And be sure that my group has a message and a purpose.
I love that. I love how you said carrying it. It's so important. I
Yeah.
miss that forever. I miss it.
Yeah. So we don't, who am I carrying it to? I've got a guy who's a big burly guy and he doesn't scare easily. And we've been talking for a year now about going to the homeless encampment and seeing if anybody wants to consider sobriety. I wouldn't do it alone. I think that would be foolish, but what if I can carry a message? Mm-hmm. Anyway, it's one of the thoughts we've had. I'm a little scared, so I haven't rushed it. Now it's spring. I got to think about it again.
Yeah.
So, how can we deliver this hope and this sense of recovery? You'd think people would be desperate, and they usually are desperate before they surrender. But most of us experienced that precious, precious sense of us coming together, coming in from the cold to warm ourselves at the AA fellowship fireplace. Mm-hmm. In my home, we try to make it so that people feel welcome always. Even the people who don't live here, and especially the larger community beyond our immediate family, because I was such a jerk. It's part of my amends process. How do I act differently? And the traditions tell me how I might do that. Some way for people to know that they're part of a family for however long they're with us. So I think with the fifth tradition, it's a bit like tradition one in that it really strengthens unity. You know how I picture it though. I'm pretty I'm a practical spiritual person, not too arty-farty, airy-fairy, not too much in the heavens. I've got my feet firmly planted. So do you remember the movie March of the Penguins?
Yeah.
There's a scene in it where all the penguins form a circle. Do you remember it?
I don't remember that.
It's like we do. We end a meeting by forming this odd AA circle. It's never quite a circle.
Yeah.
And there, because it's Antarctica and not Miami, it's bitter cold and it's windy. And the penguins on the outside take their turn. And they switch with penguins grouped on the inside. And the warm ones then take a turn to surround someone so they can come in from the cold.
Wow.
It works for the good of all. And we do just about much the same. Our purpose is clear. We try to find common ground and safe harbor, and we shelter each other until we can go back out into the cold.
Yeah.
With a different meaning.
Yeah, and it puts our focus, back in perspective, right? It's like, man, that's what we're here for.
Yeah, I need to go to a meeting when I need to go to a meeting. Like just going to a meeting, often I'm coming in there when I would just as soon run around somewhere, scream and shout and run around because I'm a running kind of drunk when I'm uncomfortable.
Yeah.
So for me, finding a way to be comfortable has to do with that building of that marvelous sense of trust. That happens even if I don't know the people in a room, I know the people in that room.
Yeah.
I think it's harder for newcomers. They don't have the trust yet. They haven't had a spiritual experience. And they want the old pain reliever, Johnny Walker, Jimmy Beam, or Jose,
Yeah.
But when somebody in AA sticks their hands out and is willing to talk and tries turning them to a different way of life with new ideals and offer them support, I think sometimes when that happens, we're all going to be more unified as the result. So, but the last part of that is, do I have a message? And that's, what does my life look like?
Wow.
What does my life look like? That's because my life is my message. Does my group have a message? Can you see it when you walk into my group? In my group, my little group wrestles with trying to find ways to get visitors because we're small. And we want to reach out with someone who comes in the door defeated and scared. And we get very excited. And we hope to give away our only real resources in AA, our spiritual selves and our time and our program. So every inventory my group has, we've asked, does my group essentially carry the same message? Are we carrying the same message? Does one person say, let's read the book, and the other one says, never read the book? We've been strong enough to attract a number of mentally ill, sober people. We have a schizophrenic, for God's sakes. He's 14 years sober.
Nice.
And he has voices. And he knows to try to go beyond it, even though he's as goofy as the rest of us. And he offers the hand of the fellowship instead of, a bottle of rum. So I think it's our common purpose that makes the schizophrenic part of us. We just bring this who we are and our experience. And the backgrounds come with us. So, I have a friend that she's not alive anymore. Just a long last story. She had a problem with anger turned inward. She'd fought a long time to get over the desire to harm herself when she got angry. And she'd get desperate and she would cut on herself. And it interfered with the life she wanted to live. She'd worked hard. She belonged to singing groups and religious groups and dancing groups and AA groups. And she worked hard to overcome this handicap and change what was essentially a very dark place that she couldn't get to. And And finally, asking around, we were able to put her in touch with someone who could share a similar difficulty. Another person had been afflicted with a serious eating disorder. She could not work an AA program when she was dying. So we sent some of our recovered loved ones to speak with her. Someone with the same problem who's recovered. There's a reason some meetings call themselves Children of Chaos. Because there's probably no kind of trouble we haven't had. And don't you think it's important that we know that we don't have all the answers to life's problems?
Amen. Yeah.
But sometimes we can be helpful.
Yeah. It's a common theme over the last year or so is guys that will come to me and they have mental health stuff going on. I had this past year, this last Christmas, I had a sponsee kill himself 2 days before Christmas. Yeah. And, man, but it's a common theme over the last year or so, and it's an eye opener, to be honest with you. And through the process over the last year or so, I've got in touch with a lot of different people that, long-term sobriety, got good programs, and have effectively been able to take care of their mental illness in different ways.
Yeah, but we have to get over our own arrogance.
Yeah.
To think that we have all the answers to life's problems, that I have all the answers to your problems, or you have all the answers to mine. AAs love to hand somebody a solution before sometimes we even know what their problem is.
Amen.
We're going to beat them over the head with our solution, but we don't know if they even needed that answer yet.
Amen. That's so important.
So I always keep an Al-Anon phone number and an NA number on my list of numbers, because I never know. If somebody came up with somebody, we'd check around for people who had recovered from that defect or that behavior, and we introduce them together so that they can have the same mutual experiences in those discussions that we need. I don't have all the experiences, and you don't either.
Yeah.
I have some.
Mm-hmm.
I'm a family person. There are people out there who aren't family people. And sometimes I get grandchildren sponsees or great-grandchildren sponsees who call because their sponsors never had families. I don't have a dog. I had kids, and I don't need a dog. But for people that are dog lovers, we can put them together, and they can, find other ways to connect pieces of their lives. It's useful to know Al-Anons and gamblers and ex-convicts and people who've had abortions, or people who've lost partners, or people who've already gone through the weeds of life and know where the snakes are.
Amen. Yeah.
So I don't think that we make our program about the problems. I'm suggesting just the opposite, that we try to get to know people, closed-mouth friends with similar experiences, that we can share with some of those, but because that's the places to share it interpersonally, it's not at the meeting.
Yeah.
There are some of our meetings that really encourage people to overshare quite a bit.
Amen.
About sexual things and things that really shouldn't come up to a podium. Local coffee. Let's have coffee. That's a better way to do it.
Yeah.
Let's just have a cup of coffee. So, but our one binding commonality is booze.
Yeah.
Not what you drank or how long or anything like that. But if I'm drunk, I don't handle anything.
Well, it goes, like for me and my experiences is, you lose touch with that, right? It's what's happened is, they just never had touch with it, or they've lost touch with the fact that that's not what we're here for, right? It's like,
yeah,
I'm dying of, there's people coming in here dying.
Yeah.
Yeah. And it's serious.
I think that's your life and mine are both at stake when we do that.
Yeah.
So I love this line, when it says, cling to the thought that in God's hands, the dark past is the greatest possession you have.
Yeah.
The key to life and happiness for others.
Mm.
We don't solve problems. We're not a solving problem organization.
Yeah.
And we certainly aren't going to solve problems we either weren't invited into or don't know anything about.
Mm. Mm-hmm. So true.
So it's not like anybody's so pure that they've never had other issues. I could go into issues.
Yeah.
But when I'm in AA, I don't talk about those things. Sometimes with sponsees I do.
Yeah.
Because it's appropriate there.
Yeah. It just goes
And I don't talk about them at a group. I think it messes up a group.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it goes back to the focus, right? What are we here for?
Well, yeah, and if we, I was at a meeting, and I had not been to this meeting place in a couple of years, and it was a noon meeting, and normally noon meetings are pretty good. And this one, some guy started the meeting, was fairly young in sobriety, and he said, "I'd like to talk about movies, because now that I'm sober, movies seem really different to me." Fortunately, somebody saved the day right away.
Yeah.
But it was in danger of going down the tubes fast.
Yeah. And that's the cool part about a powerful group too. You let something like that happen for a second, and then reel it back in, right?
Right. A lot of us have food addictions, some drug concerns. We're overspenders, under-earners, workaholics, and sex addicted. There's all kinds of things that are out there. But in my personal sponsorship, no matter what you got going on, I usually say, can we do the steps first around one thing, and then we'll figure out what it is you need to get to. Because you may need help with other things, but we can't do both. I can't. Maybe somebody else can, but I cannot. I've not been an ex-convict.
Mm-hmm.
I've not been lots of things. I've only got my story, and thank God the more we know each other, the more we can help people find somebody they can connect with.
Yeah.
And it's really good to know that I don't have to be it.
Mm-hmm.
I want to show up for that, but I'm not always the right person.
Yeah. Me and my wife were talking earlier about, there was a time in my recovery where I would, when I meet a person and I wasn't so sure they were alcoholic or not, or that thought never even really crossed my mind. I thought my job was to convince them they were, right? And the troubles that came, and also like what you were saying, the arrogance of like thinking we could fix everything or whatever.
Yeah.
And, because we have a buddy of ours that just started drinking, and when we were talking about it, and I was like, this particular person, he's made a comment several times. He's not really sure he's an alcoholic, and I'm not there to convince him, And
we don't need more members. We need more alcoholics.
Yeah.
We really don't. We don't need, if you don't know, the book offers you a solution.
Yeah.
I even think that the Marty Mann test is a decent one.
Mm. Yeah.
And, a person's got to know whether you're sober 3 hours or 33 years. You have to know if you're an alcoholic today.
Yeah. That's the key. I mean, if I haven't established that, then, what's the, I'm going to be willing to do what I have to do or else,
Why would you do anything if you don't have that?
Yeah.
Heck, go to the movie and get some extra buttered popcorn.
Yeah. It's true though, right? It's true.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Go to church. Go join a choir. Go do something else. If this is not your solution, it is not your social life that's at question here.
Yeah.
And the problem is that, we get to have numerous loving, goofy souls that are there to help us see the light. But I don't think that it includes inviting and encouraging people to be there who aren't alcoholics. I know that's not a popular opinion sometimes.
I agree with you.
But the tradition reminds me that I'm not a problem solver. God is.
Yeah. Amen.
But it's really important that we can carry a message only to the people that have an experience, because my experience is the only thing I have of value.
Yeah.
We know that. But we need to cooperate with other groups so we know where to send people.
Yeah.
So we can I'll offer to take somebody to a CA or an NA meeting. I try not to tell people, go to this meeting or that meeting. I try to say, I'll go with you. But we help them to gather their own strength by walking through a big book. But if you're not here and you need to be somewhere else, it's really important that I let you go find that meeting that works for you. It's interesting to me that I heard, I have not verified it, but I think it's true, that the guy who founded Gamblers Anonymous was an alcoholic first.
Hmm.
And then he thought, I've got this other problem. Like many of us have got a secondary problem or a third. And it's really hard sometimes to just be a good member and stay humble, right? But a lot of things are problems that aren't investments in illness. But I don't know anything about cocaine. I've never used cocaine. I can't, if I've got somebody who's completely out of their gourd around drugs, I'm not taking them to an AIM meeting. They might be an alcoholic, but then we get to, let's sit down and talk about it and figure it out.
Yeah.
Let me help you find where you belong.
Mm-hmm.
With the same compassion I would have for an alcoholic.
Yeah.
I'm not clean and sober. I'm sober.
Yeah.
And I think it's important.
And right here in my hometown, there was a within a 5-mile radius, there's probably 10 recovery houses, right? So it's just a flood of just
wow.
Yeah, I mean that's probably actually probably more than that, honestly. So there's a flood of like new people around here, and
you're so lucky.
Yeah, amen. Yeah, it's constantly people to work with, and but so there was an unmet need for like drug addiction, and there wasn't an NA meeting like this a few years ago. There wasn't a drug like an NA meeting or anything that had to do with drugs. So like all the AA meetings around town was just all like, I mean, you meet all kinds of people that weren't alcoholics that were in the meetings, and
right.
So I had a sponsee that got sober about 30 minutes away, probably 6-7 years ago, and he got sober in Cocaine Anonymous, and so he ended up moving here a couple years back, and I started sponsoring him, and he ended up starting a Cocaine Anonymous meeting here because there was such an unmet need for it, and now it's a pretty powerful group now.
Yeah,
and it helps a lot of people.
One of my friends used to go and do a big book study once a year, weekend thing for Crystal Meth Anonymous.
Yeah.
And she would fly off to New York, and they had a strong group. And she knew that she was giving them the tools to carry on their purpose.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
I see nothing that says that we don't cooperate, we don't help each other, we don't respect each other. None of that.
Yeah.
None of that.
Yeah.
We've got no shortage of people.
Yeah, and I'd heard actually that Bill Wilson, I'm not sure how true it was, but I heard a pretty reliable source said that Bill Wilson, had mentioned, like if you have someone that's not an alcoholic, yada yada yada, but they're suffering from different addictions or whatever, take them through the steps outside of an AA meeting setting, right, and help them like find a solution and go do the thing. And I also heard you may know this. You may know, I heard that Don P. Helped out in starting some CA stuff, like at least help them get established in certain ways. I don't know how true that is, but with Mark H. and them.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, that's what I heard.
And Gary Cluckstall helped put Sex Addicts Anonymous principles into work at the administrative level, like we do with our concepts and stuff and traditions. He helped. Yeah, we freely give our stuff, but we identify where we identify.
Yeah.
So that we can be more effective. I think that was what I was trying to say with the guy that started Gamblers Anonymous. He died drunk.
Wow.
Is what I've heard. And because he went off to do this other thing with all the enthusiasm alcoholics always have. So enthusiastic. And never kind of found his way back to his own addiction with alcohol. So we do that stuff. We sure do love to get enthusiastic.
Yeah. It's so true.
And that's why this humility piece of, just understand that there's a lot that we can't do.
Yeah.
But we can help make a connection.
Yeah. Well, it's funny because like the quote you had mentioned earlier was actually one of my favorite parts in the 12 and 12 is out of step 7 where it talks about our chase for comfort or character building, right? And it's talking about how usually, we never thought of humility as being something as desirable in itself.
I always loved that because I sure didn't.
Amen. Right. I think that's the difference between treated alcoholism and untreated, kind of. Right. I mean, it's. So, it's
right.
Crazy.
You might be absolutely right. The thing that saved me my first couple of years that were so desperate was that line that says the alcoholic's past thus becomes the principal asset of the family. And frequently it is almost the only one. I mean, you got to picture this single drunk mother with 4 kids and a niece. So there were 5 kids there most of the time. And not 3 nickels to rub together. Defiance, anger, bad behavior, no mother running herd on anybody, and constant fear.
Yeah.
For me. What I brought was that past. And we could begin to dig it out once I began to get sober, and then not until.
Man, it's been great. Yeah, thank you so much. Yeah, I love this. This is my favorite stuff right here, honestly. And
well, I think it's great, and again, I think it needs to be applied. It needs to be applied in all the areas where my ego always tells me I'm in charge.
Yeah.
In all of this stuff. It's really only an ego that doesn't know that you parent with God's help. You step parent with a lot more of God's help.
I had a sponsor he once tell me, he said, you know why they call them step kids? Because they make you work the steps.
I'm telling you. Yeah. Yeah. Those experiences have been interesting.
Yeah.
They really have, but my grandchildren only know one grandpa, and that's the one who they aren't even related to. But he's the one that has been there all the years, all along.
Same here, yeah. My
and every time we've taken any of them on a trip, and we've tried to do that, get them away from their parents, for God's sakes, and let them be with us for a while. And so we can talk to them, and their generation, they talk for the kids most of the time. And so we take them on trips, or we have anyway. We've taken all of the older ones on. And we always talk to them about Alcoholics Anonymous and say, you might have a friend someday who needs to know about this. Here's our experience. Here's who we are. We don't talk about it over dinner very much, but And it's not because you guys have never seen us drink. But if you run into people who look like they might be going down a path that scares you, either call or talk to them, or we can give you some understanding perhaps. So we're trying our best to let them know that AA is out there, whether it's them or a friend.
I love the wisdom that, like, you had just the comment you just made when you were talking about how, you know, they were from a generation that parents talk for their kids. Just knowing that, having the, you know, the experience that you have to be able to share something like that is huge.
Oh, thank you.
Yeah.
Yeah, there's they're all better parents than I was, but I still want to correct them all.
Yeah. Yeah, that's funny.
Isn't that funny? It's just, but they're, yeah, I know.
The human dilemma. Yeah.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
We're so human.
Yeah.
And I'm grateful for every bit of relief I've had from me.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah. Thank goodness.
So, thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
I hope some of this makes sense.
Every bit
I
of
know
it.
that people, and I want to be really clear that you don't have to be anything to be an AA, but you do need to have a problem with alcohol.
Yeah. Amen.
And whatever else you got is secondary.
Yeah.
Just like when you're drinking, everything in your life is secondary.
Yeah. And if you're curious about, you know, what that even looks like, you know, because get with someone in an Alcoholics Anonymous meeting and ask them, right? You know.
Yep. That's why it's so good to know people who have walked the same. That's that experience, we thought. The dark past of somebody else who has walked that path.
Yeah.
Is so valuable.
I was confused with it because I was, you know, I have other substance abuse stuff too, right? And like
Sure,
it'd been a while since I drank by the time I got sober, you know. But then, like at the end of the day, like I'd always went back to, you know, alcohol is my thing for years and years and years and years and years, and it was always my go-to. And so I was kind of, you know, in the beginning, I wasn't sure that if I was an alcoholic or not. I didn't even know what that meant. Even though I knew I had a huge drinking history, I didn't know what that even meant, you know?
I don't think we do. I've told you, you know how I feel about that.
Yeah.
We use so many words, we don't know what words mean.
Yeah.
And I wouldn't have known what an alcoholic was.
Mm-hmm.
I didn't have any in my immediate family.
Yeah.
I didn't know what a parent was. I didn't know what a father was. I didn't know what a marriage looked like. There were a lot of things I didn't know that I thought I knew.
Yeah.
But that whole question of nobody, the problem was nobody sat me down.
Amen.
And maybe I wasn't sittable. There's that.
Yeah.
You know, nobody sat me down and said, honey, here's what alcoholism is.
Yeah.
And our experiences are different.
Yeah.
Not everybody goes to jail. Not everybody does this or that or the other thing.
Yeah.
Our experiences can be different. I sponsored a woman who was definitely an alcoholic. She was an engineer type mind. And so she mapped out her backyard and buried all her bottles.
Yeah. Yeah.
So when everybody else went to bed, she'd go out in the backyard and drink through the night.
Yeah.
Pulling up a bottle until finally somebody caught her.
Mm-hmm.
She had everything buried in her backyard.
Wow.
You know, I never did that. I always drank right out in the open.
Yeah.
A gallon of red on one side, a gallon of white on the other by the door. After I stopped drinking, that was what I thought I would do. I'll just have wine. Now that I don't drink.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's it. Yeah.
Right.
I tell you, like as a sponsor, like for me, it's like one of the most important things I can do is when I'm sitting down with the guys, like, and a constant just reminder of like, hey, look, this powerlessness thing, right? It's vital that we can find ourselves in this book, and I think I shared before with you in the past about how, like, I'm grateful that, they just didn't automatically assume, which in the beginning they probably did. They automatically assumed, but like, I'm grateful eventually it got to a point where they didn't automatically assume that I was just an alcoholic because they met me in an AA meeting. And because,
Right.
it's not just something it's not something that just, I can just decide to quit or whatever, right? I found
Right.
myself in that book and I've seen how important it was to have a spiritual connection, right? And that's huge, and and that's the key to it, right? So when I'm working with guys, I'm constantly talking about this powerlessness, empower, right?
Right.
Yeah, it's huge. I mean, that's what the requirement, right?
Don't you think that behind a lot of alcoholic behavior is a search for
Amen.
power,
Yeah, every bit of it.
self,
Yeah.
esteem, and freedom from fear?
Mm-hmm.
I think a lot of it. I
Amen.
agree with you on, that's and that's why when we are, I don't care what it is, what it looks like, when we talk about access to a power greater than yourself, I am not thinking in religious terms, I must tell you.
Same here. Yeah.
I'm not, because I'm too AA trained for that.
Amen. Same here. I don't even don't get me wrong. I use the word God, but I rather use the word power.
I use the word God. I use the word power.
Yeah.
I want to say things, but I do a little imagery of my own. It's like if I were to tell you how my husband is to me, he is my shade tree.
Mm. Mm. Nice. I heard Don once on one of his talks. He said that he seen, and it clicked when I heard it. He was like, I seen how I was searching for power when I was a kid, and I could lie about being sick and not going to school, right? And I was at a real young age. And you mentioned it earlier.
Some of us have been seekers our whole lives and don't even know it. Yeah. It's true.
Yeah. Well, thank you, Judy. And
thank you so much for your time.
Yeah, thank you.
And this opportunity. It's been great to kick around some ideas.
Yeah.
I hope nobody's thoroughly bored, but if they are, they can watch something else, read something else.
Yeah. I've been sunk into literally every bit of this. It's my stuff right here. And for the listeners, me and Judy are meeting up again this upcoming Sunday, which is May 26th. And we're going to do part 4, which is traditions 6 and 7. And thank you so much. And I hope you have a wonderful night. I'll talk to you this week.
Thank you. Talk to you later.
See you.
Bye-bye.
Hello. Thank you for listening to 3 Legacies Recovery Recordings. If you enjoy our program, please be sure to like and subscribe to the channel, and don't forget to share with a friend. We're also self-supporting, so feel free to contribute to the channel through Venmo at Recovery Recordings 615. Please note that the views expressed on this podcast are solely our individual views and do not represent any official stance of any 12-step program. We are not affiliated with any specific recovery organization, and this content should not be considered as professional advice for alcoholism or addiction.